What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to the AEW Dynasty Pay-Per-Viewpoint post-show, 2024 edition, I should say, for the future people listening to this. I'm, as always, Tony Mango, flying solo on this edition. We'll try to get Rob's and Callum's opinions about this pay-per-view sometime over the next week or so, heading into the hot tags, but just mine for this episode. And I'll say in advance, I don't have a lot to say about this pay-per-view, so this is going to be a rather short one. I could drag it out if I really, really wanted to, but I don't think that you necessarily want to hear me just kind of stumble over the same opinions over and over again and all. So we're going to make it pretty quick overall. It is midnight, not that applies to somebody like me who barely sleeps and stuff, but anybody that's funneling in, I'm not going to keep you super, super long. But in the meantime, if you want to chat it up in the, not the comment section below, if of course you're listening to this after the fact in the comments, then definitely do that. But in the live chat it up. If you want me to really pay attention to what's going on there, super chats are the best way to catch my attention since it just pops up on the screen better. See Marco's in the chat. What's up, Marco? And keep in mind, if you are trying to get your opinion out there elsewhere outside of the comment section and stuff, we've got the Discord that you should be joining. Chat it up during the pay-per-views and TV shows and just random times at any time, any moment you want to. Keep in place the other this marketplace stuff. Keep in place. Wow, I'm just out of it tonight. Keep in mind all of these marketplace stuff. Redbubble and TeePublic for the merchandise side of things. Patreon.com/SmarkoutMoment for everything on that end. Of course, the YouTube channel membership's exactly the same as the Patreon. Double check that you are subscribed here. Ring that little notification bell if you didn't already. That's completely free, obviously. It's typical YouTube stuff. Little thanks button is also another way for you to get those kind of super chat type things out there. Not in the same kind of way as being live, but we hope to always get you guys live for those things too. So any chance that you get, then definitely do that. But as far as this pay-per-view is concerned, I don't know where to start other than, obviously I'm going to start with the pre-show, but I don't know where to kind of do with the preamble of this, because if you listen to the predictions, basically how I was approaching this, which was that I wasn't super duper thrilled about the pay-per-view, but that's mostly because of the way that I've just been overloaded on a lot of the pro wrestling content for a long, long time now. The longer you've been listening for a while, you know that that's the case, but WWE has been really hitting what I tend to enjoy, and AEW hasn't quite as much. Rob likes to say different strokes for different folks. It's kind of applicable, and I am not super attuned to the current AEW style. A lot of the people that are there are not the most engaging acts for me personally, and some of the style of the pay-per-views, still just to this day, I can't fully connect with pay-per-views that are just a constant stream of matches, because I need a little bit of not like a downtime necessarily, but I need something to differentiate it other than to just have, a different person on there, because it then feels to me like I'm watching, it's midnight now. This started at 6:30. So, 5.5 hours worth of just the same thing gets really my brain just kind of disconnects after a little while, especially if it's one of the things that I'm not super duper interested in. So I think it's just going to be a thing with AEW for me. Just that style doesn't appeal to me in the same way that it appeals to Callum, for instance. I know that Callum is going to say that he really enjoyed this pay-per-view and all. I'm sure that Rob is probably in the middle of the two of us, kind of like the way that it normally is. But I always want to know what you guys have to say. Even if you disagree with me, chat it up in the live chat or the comments. Tell me what you liked that I didn't like. Tell me what you didn't like that I did. It's all about having a good discussion here. So I'm hoping, of course, not to yuck on anybody's yum and be too down on things that everybody really likes. But then again, I'm going to give my honest opinion the way that I normally do. So I'll say this very straightforward dismissal of a couple things. I barely paid any attention to the pre-show stuff. The 3 matches and, of course, the half hour of the, video packages and all just wasn't doing anything for me. So for anybody who missed that, Trent beat out Trent Beretta, I should say, because he's not just Trent anymore, with the question mark. Trent beat Matt Sydal by submission, held on to his chokehold a little bit too long, whatever. And he eventually gave Chuck Taylor basically until Dynamite to like pick a side between him and Orange Cassidy. So it's the type of thing that like right after that, Orange Cassidy and Katsuyori Shibata beat Shan Taylor Promotions. And I have no interest in Shan Taylor Promotions. I do not follow Ring of Honor, and the little bits of Ring of Honor that I have, those were not the standout acts for me. So that's, of course, another element of like, all right, not really super digging this, but I'm interested in the Orange Cassidy and Trent feud. So if that would have been the match, then I would have been paying more attention. For this to be Trent beats somebody else and Orange Cassidy, and also just randomly Katsuyori Shibata, beat somebody else, and then we're told the story's going to continue on Dynamite. It's very similar to when I criticize WWE and I go like, why are we doing a promo on a pay-per-view when, you know, yes, you got to split some stuff between pay-per-views and TV shows, and not everything can be on a pay-per-view and all, but I don't know, I kind of feel like maybe this would have been a better scenario to have already told part of that story, and we could have gotten Orange Cassidy and Katsuyori Shibata against Trent Beretta and Chuck Taylor if he makes that decision. That I'd be more into. Matt Sydal being a part of this, I think he's like, he might be from St. Louis, so maybe that was like them throwing him a bone a little bit. I don't know about Shane Taylor and Lee Moriarty, maybe the same kind of thing. But man, I'll tell you one part of this that I was just kind of like, kind of threw me off a little bit. There was a little element here where Anthony Gogo was on the commentary booth for the tag match, and I forget who he was talking about. He said something about, oh, if I would have punched him, he wouldn't even be competing here. And Taz goes, oh, are you saying that you punch harder than him? And he's like, yeah. And then Taz is like, so what you're saying is you punch harder than him? And Gogo goes like, yeah, I was a boxer or whatever. And Taz is like, I'm just asking if you think that you punch harder than him. And I actually turned around to my wife and I was like, God damn, Taz, we fucking get the point, like move on from this section of the commentary. That was just like a frustrating kind of thing. Obviously, Danielson in the chat now, didn't watch pay-per-view due to the paywall. Was that any good? The long and short of it, I would say, is if you really love the AEW style, I got a feeling that most people are going to say that it was a good pay-per-view with a couple great moments in there. And then I do see that there are some people online that are saying that they really disliked a lot of this. And it seems from my kind of cursory glances that a lot of it was people mad at the outcomes of the matches more so than necessarily the matches themselves. So to each their own. It wasn't WrestleMania to me, but I don't know how much they really were trying to make it WrestleMania either. It's kind of an unfair comparison. That's the biggest show of the year for WWE. AEW Dynasty is just another show, and they've still not really kind of classified what their, Double or Nothing, I thought for the longest time was their SummerSlam, and that All Out was their WrestleMania, but it kind of seems like they treat Double or Nothing like their WrestleMania sometimes. Now we've got the Wembley stuff, so sort of feels like maybe that might be the new, like, that's the biggest hot ticket item thing. Certainly not Full Gear. Full Gear is not their WrestleMania. And Revolution, a lot of people make the arguments for that too, so I don't know. But yeah, this wasn't WrestleMania to me. But then again, I think it's a little unfair to try to judge it based off of that. So but then again, like I said, like I wasn't paying too much attention to the kickoff matches or the 0 hour matches, not kickoff. We just had that whole discussion with the whole thing with Callum saying that. The winners take all match for the AEW World Trios Championships and the ROH 6-man tag team titles wasn't really capturing my attention either. Bullet Club Gold beat the Acclaimed. I think that that's the smart decision, just as we talked about on the prediction side of it, that I think that that is the team that has a little bit more oomph going forward. And, I'm a big fan of the Acclaim. Like, they've been one of my favorite acts in AEW, but they've gotten stale. And I don't think that they've done anything with the trios titles that really made it seem like, well, they've got to keep it because there's all these feuds left for them to do, or that there's a certain, they have to reach a certain milestone or anything. So it just feels like, I think that this is probably the right decision. And I'm not checking out the media call yet. It's too hard to do that. Check out everything on the screen, run the OBS and talk and, do all that. But I'm hoping that there's more clarification about this being unified. And as I said before, I don't think we need the ROH 6-man tag team titles. And I'm trying to stop myself from sneezing right now. I think that the best course of action going forward is to just not have those belts. ROH doesn't seem like it can sustain a 6-man tag team division. So keep the tag titles in ROH, keep the singles belts. I'd argue that maybe you should get rid of one of them. I've never liked the ROH television, any television title and all. They have plenty mid-card titles in AEW right now. And then, I think that maybe they should just kind of get rid of those ROH 6-man tag. I don't know. Based off of the way that they've done this in the past, they probably won't. And we're probably going to see that this is just going to continue as Bullet Club Gold holds all of those. But I'm more interested in what happens now with these belts than I was with 2 separate sets of champions. So we'll see. But I really started to okay, now I got to really start paying attention. I've eaten dinner. I've, gotten past the 0 hour and all. And the first match of the main card starts, and it's Kazuchika Okada against Pac for the AEW Continental Championship. And I gotta say, everybody's going to eviscerate me for this kind of thing. I'm seeing a lot of people say, wow, it's hard to beat that one. And they really set the tone for this pay-per-view. I was bored. I was looking forward to this match as one of the top matches I wanted to see. And I wrote down on here, I don't understand what's warranting the "this is awesome" chant. I thought that they were kind of in a slog up until the point that Okada gave the middle finger to the audience. And then everything picked up. But by then it was 3 minutes left in the match. So when it finally got to where my attention was all right, yeah, I'm back in. I'm locked and loaded. You guys are doing something that I'm really interested in. Then it was pretty much over. All the stuff leading up to that, it just wasn't hitting for me. So I'd love to hear from other people what they thought specifically stood out to them about that. And it sounds kind of like I'm already preemptively arguing, but I don't want to really hear "it was a good match, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about," because that's not an argument. I want to hear, what was it about? Can you point to certain sequences of moves or any kind of storytelling? If we agree, not only just, us talking, me talking to the listeners and you guys leaving your comments and all, but as the IWC, if we collectively agree that the whole purpose of pro wrestling matches is that it's equal parts the dance act of the athleticism and the maneuvers that they perform, and also then the ring psychology and telling some kind of a story in the ring. I didn't see any moves here that made me go, whoa, what a great stunt act. And then at the same time, I also didn't see any story. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I missed out on something. I don't know. But I'd love to hear the argument for why this was such a fantastic match. Because to me, this seemed on par with I don't know, the Jimmy and Jey Uso match maybe or something. It was just a series of moves that I can't remember up until we got to towards the very end. So I'm very disappointed in this match. I thought that this had one of the best potentials, and I was just very underwhelmed. That didn't set a great tone. And there were better matches throughout the night for sure, but I was already feeling man, we're on our 4th match here. I'm not digging this. And then the match that followed, that was the trios match, the House of Black against the Rated R Chicken Hawks, I think is what they called themselves. Eddie Kingston, Mark Briscoe, and Adam Copeland. And this was a fine enough match. It was just sort of a match. There's really nothing for me to talk about here. It sounds like I'm copping out, but I like the front flip that Mark Briscoe did. I didn't expect him to be able to pull that off. I thought that was pretty cool. And it ended in a way that I thought made perfect sense. Malakai Black, I was going to call him Aleister Black. Malakai Black spit the mist in Adam Copeland's face when Cope was going for a spear. Hits him with the Black Mass. 1, 2, 3. So he's pinned the champion, and I would assume either maybe at Double or Nothing if they don't do it ahead of time, but I'd bank more on it's happening at Double or Nothing, that Malakai Black is going to fight Adam Copeland. And maybe he's going to be the next champion. He very well could be. I don't know. Kind of depends on how much he's really enjoying being in AEW right now versus when he might potentially leave. Because he's one of the main people that a lot of people are suspecting could leave and go back to WWE. So I thought that they did their jobs well enough. And it was kind of bog standard in a way. Like it just, they had a match. The right outcome happened, and then now going forward, you know who the number one contender should be, and that's not a bad thing either. It's just, I don't know really how much to talk about. It's just like, all right, they did what they should have done, and that's it, I can't say quite the same when it came to the House Rules match for the TBS Championship. Julia Hart going in as champion, dropping the belt to Willow Nightingale. It was pretty quick, and I had said before that I thought that this should be a quick match because if Julia Hart is injured, and then on top of that, it's just really hard to believe that somebody the size of Julia Hart could put up that much of a fight against Willow Nightingale. Just the same as, I don't think like a Rey Mysterio versus Big Show match should be some 20-minute thing. Or, when Adam Cole was standing next to Keith Lee, it was like, okay, well, there's a big size difference there. And if Willow were to get into an actual fight with Julia Hart, I'm assuming that this will be over in, 6.5 seconds or so. Not saying that the match should have lasted that short, but it wasn't long enough to really get going. And then it was also not short enough to make it feel like they did it for that particular reason. So it just sort of came in and came out. And of course, my least favorite part of this whole thing was Mercedes Monet had to come out, and then we had to hear the CEO chanting theme song, which I just hate with a passion. It's going to be on my end of the year list for worst a couple things, I'm assuming. But Willow was embraced by Chris Statlander because she's the champion now. Then we had the whole face-off of Mercedes, so we're immediately just transitioning over to that Double or Nothing event. And I'm still really torn on what they do with that. Because to me, it's kind of a no-win situation. If Willow Nightingale loses the title so fast, there's going to be a portion of the audience that just goes, oh, crap, you couldn't even give the belt, really, to Willow? She held it for 3 weeks or something. And then on the flip side, if you don't give the win to Mercedes, and especially now with her just cutting these pretty awful promos and having those kind of segments, then that's going to feel weird too. So I am keeping to... I don't remember when I had said it originally. Maybe it was just prior to the predictions or something. Maybe it was before that even. I'm keeping to one of my previous ideas, which was Mercedes is going to win that belt from Willow at Double or Nothing. And in the process, Mercedes and or Chris Statlander will turn heel. At this point, I'm kind of leaning towards maybe it's going to be both of them. And that the hug with Statlander is something that's just, before she turns or something. And, we can kind of keep that going. But I think maybe there's also a chance that I'm just reading that wrong. And maybe Statlander is going to be the next person for Mercedes to feud with after Willow. Because that could work too. I'd be totally down for that. So Willow's going to have that title for a short amount of time. But I think in the grand scheme, it's probably the better idea for her to have done that and beaten Julia. Then we get this going forward. It's just, how do we get there in a way that doesn't make it seem so obvious? I guess we're going to have to see starting on Dynamite, right? No title change when it came to the International Championship. Roderick Strong successfully retaining over Kyle O'Reilly. I was digging this match a lot more than Okada and Pac. And everything was working for me up until Wardlow came in. They got a little bit awkward. And I don't know if they're really going for it was supposed to be awkward because it kind of gave a little bit of those vibes afterward too, but a little bit of interference from him. Roderick Strong retains after a very good back and forth match. And then the Undisputed Era comes out, or the Undisputed Kingdom, rest of them come out, and Adam Cole gets out of the wheelchair. He's no longer in the wheelchair anymore. So that's really cool too, to see him progressing like that. So it's not where I'd want a lot of these people to be, but Roderick Strong is just one of those wrestler type wrestlers. and giving him a championship to defend and to just have matches and all is about what you can do with Roderick Strong for the most part. They said something on commentary tonight that I don't know if they've mentioned before, but it at least resonated with me more tonight than it ever did before if I forgot about it, which they were saying that Roderick Strong reminds them of Dean Malenko. And I was like, that's actually a really good analogy, because Dean Malenko was not somebody who was like, the most charismatic on the microphone type guy. He was not the tallest guy. He was in the cruiserweight division and all, but he knew a shit ton of wrestling moves, and he was really damn fun to watch in the ring. So Roderick Strong kind of is sort of a Dean Malenko of this generation, that's pretty interesting. I wonder how many more parallels that we could get on there. It's one of those topics that I've always wanted to do. I've always, like, back in the day when Tyler Breeze was in NXT, I was like, oh, is he the Shawn Michaels of the future, or is he the Dolph Ziggler of the future? And like, we had a whole big plan. I just never ended up doing it. I think it was going to be called Mirror Image Matchups, was going to be the whole gimmick name behind it. And I couldn't figure out how to, like, do the gimmick in like a pay-per-view, like, not pay-per-view, like in a podcast fashion. Let me fix my hair a little bit here. I couldn't figure out like how to, do a discussion on that without just having like graphics all over the screen. And I'm not going to bother with that as much. I see Ashton in the chat. Congrats again, Ashton, for winning the Funko Pop and all. Haven't finished the pay-per-view yet, just showing support. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Ashton. Love the support. I see Amir's in the chat too. I like the tag ladder match. Definitely going to get in that one. That's one of my favorite ones of the night. International title stays where it is. Can't say the same about the FTW championship though. And this was a pretty solid segment. Hook and Chris Jericho had their Falls Count Anywhere matches, which of course I enjoy. Solid no DQ action, nothing too crazy to talk about. No specific spots that made me go like, okay, crap, I got to add that down to the best, or for that matter, worst of the end of the year type spots or botches or anything. They just had a, solid enough no DQ match. And I think the biggest standout thing actually was probably Hook kicking out of 2 Judas effects. So that's kind of like his big moment in here. And then they try to do the whole thing with the I'm sorry, I love you type, Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair thing, where Jericho's got Floyd, the baseball bat, and he says, don't make me do this. And Hook just flips him off and he, nails him in the head. So it's they're kind of going with a story of like Jericho still wanting to be a teacher for Hook and not willing to let that go quite yet. They even had the learning tree on the lower third for him today. So I dig this. And I know that the pushback on this is, well, like, do you really want to see Jericho hold this championship and really do that story? I get that point of view, because I haven't been loving a lot of Jericho's storylines going forward for a while. And it kind of makes me question whether or not, this is going to be something that ultimately comes back around and loops around to like the full story is good. But I am more interested in Jericho beating Hook here, holding the FTW championship, and then losing it to Hook than I am if Hook would have just beaten him. Because I got a feeling if Hook would have just beaten him, it wouldn't have been the end of the story. And then if it would have been the end of the story, it would have been just very rushed and felt like, okay, well, they did that for like 3 weeks and that's nothing. But if it would have continued after that point, then what is the story? Not to make everything about Avengers and all, but if everybody would have just beaten Thanos in Infinity War and we have a part 2, then they just go, what do you want to do? Get some bagels? 10 points if you get that reference, by the way. Let me know. It's a cartoon from the 90s when somebody goes, I don't know, get some bagels. I think Rob probably would have gotten it off the top of his head. So yeah, I like the Hook and Jericho match for the most part. Not my favorite match of the night. And, it's not one of those things that I'm going to probably call back to at the end of the year awards in any fashion, but I thought for the most part it was fine. Same when it came to Timeless Toni Storm against Thunder Rosa. I've said plenty of times how checked out I am when it comes to Toni Storm and the same 5 people that she had been involved with for 2 years or whatever. And when you just wait a couple months and then you just go back to that, I have the same exact opinions. But I'll say, despite not being super into the timeless Toni Storm character, not being as high on Thunder Rosa as I used to be, and not being interested in this feud and all the other elements that makes me go, all right, I would skip this if it wasn't my job. They still had a fine enough match. So I got to give them credit where it's due. You know, it wasn't a match that I am going to call back on and be like, you got to check it out if you missed it or anything. But I do think that they had a solid enough competitive match. So if you are not as, I don't know if I want to say cynical, if you're not as burned out for this feud and its surrounding elements as I am, you probably liked it even more. And that's cool too. So Storm Zero eventually gets the win after Thunder Rosa had kicked out of it prior. Deonna Purrazzo had gotten involved, so she's still somewhere in the mix there. I don't know exactly where they're going to go going forward from this. It doesn't seem like it's the right time to turn Mariah May. It doesn't seem like there's anybody from my perspective that's like a guarantee to be the next person in line, especially because it's like, well, if they wait for Jamie Hayter and do that in Wembley, is that going to be the game plan for switching the title? I don't know. Mercedes is going after the TBS title, so it's not going to be her. Or at least it shouldn't be. That wouldn't make any sense. So I'm nervous that the game plan for Double or Nothing is Toni Storm versus Thunder Rosa versus Deonna Purrazzo. And it's just, let's continue the same thing again and just drag everything out even more. Because that does seem to be kind of the MO of what Tony Khan does with the women's division here for the past year or two. So I am a little like, about that, but I guess until that ends up happening, I have to just, you know, hope that it's something else. I'll say, of course, with no surprise at all, the next match was the best match of the night. Bryan Danielson against Will Ospreay. Hell of a match on my match of the year list. There's not too much I can say beyond that because it's just, oh, this is a really good match. Go back and check it out if you didn't miss, if you missed it, if you didn't see it, I should say, not if you didn't miss it. I liked that the fans were on both of their sides to the point that when Danielson would hit something, instead of it being yes, and then eventually when he gets hit, no, they were going yes, no, because they actually still support Ospreay too. So that was kind of fun. I liked tonight's one with Guinness. He always rags on Bryan Danielson. And he said, you know, the reason why he has all these awards over the years, you know, implying the idea being like, he gets this best wrestler award because he's so good, and end up being the punchline is because he pays for them. I was like, all right, that got me. But that was funny. I always love when Danielson gets fired up. I wrote a little thing about that on Wrestling News of just like, you know, he's one of the best talents to just like mid-match just be like, oh, I got my second wind, and everybody's like, hell yeah, man, like the match is going to get even more exciting now. And I liked how this ended too. They're doing a little story thing here with Danielson's neck, and there was a Tiger Driver. Will Ospreay hits that, and immediately the referee, thinking that was Bryce Remsburg, if I remember correctly, he was calling for the med staff to come and check on Danielson. And Ospreay's not paying any attention, so he just sees Danielson's up, hits him with a hidden blade, goes for a pinfall. 1, 2, 3. Okay, he's celebrating, and then the medical staff is getting Danielson checked out. And Ospreay then realizes, like, oh shit, something's wrong with him, and oh, I didn't mean to do that. And you know, I like that element to that, adding an actual story going forward instead of just, don't you want to see these two guys wrestle? And for the most part, people were just going into the pay-per-view going, yes, that's what I want. And now we've got a story. Ospreay is going to, I'm assuming, feel guilty for this, try to make it seem like, you know, hey, I wasn't doing that out of any kind of malice. I was just sort of in the moment, and I figured I could hit my hidden blade and I could do that. I pinned one of the best in the world. I can be very confident about that, but I don't like how that ended. And then probably Don Callis is going to be like, well, you know, hey, that's, you know, them's the bricks, kid. It's kind of like, you got to do those kind of things. What do you mean you don't want to win matches like that? You got to do anything to win matches. And that's probably going to lead to the split between him and the Don Callis family, which I don't know where that takes you for Double or Nothing, because we've already seen Ospreay against Konosuke Takeshita. We've already seen him against Powerhouse Hobbs. So what do you do with Ospreay in the meantime? I don't know. It's kind of intriguing, though. So I like that they incorporated this element to it. And again, if you didn't see the match itself, definitely go back and check it out. I recommend that for sure. The second best match of the night would be the next match following this, the ladder match to determine the vacated AEW World Champion for the tag team division. That tournament final came down to FTR against the Young Bucks, and we got a hell of a tag team ladder match here. And, Young Bucks and FTR work really well together, so that wasn't too shocking to begin with. Ladder matches are a whole lot of fun. Ladder match tag matches are a lot of fun. They beat the crap out of each other. There were some good spots here and there, like when this wasn't planned, but when I think it was Matt Jackson had fallen through a table, it immediately just shattered. Like it gave him no give whatsoever. So he ended up hitting his back of his head in the security barricade and all. So hopefully that didn't he didn't get injured or anything. But there was a vertical suplex off the ladder, followed up with Cash Wheeler jumping off the ladder, doing a splash. They had a pile driver through a ladder after a 450 through a ladder. So there's spots in this match that if you're more of a spot monkey type, this is definitely your thing. I enjoyed it all the way through. I think that the right decision was made. I think that despite the problems surrounding Jack Perry, having him pop out cost FTR and, work his way through as a fan in a mask, and then the reveal and all that. It's a little bit predictable, but at the same time, predictable doesn't necessarily mean bad. So I think that this was the right decision and a good match. And if this was at a different part in the night, I think that maybe could have, switched up a little bit of the momentum. Maybe it probably came around the same time that it should have been, because they were building towards. AEW tends to book the main event is towards the end, and they just kind of build upward. It's very, I guess, New Japan. We were talking about that recently. Sometimes I think that approach works better. Sometimes I think the WWE one does, where you can kind of big match. I keep hitting my microphone. Big match, and then slightly smaller match, bathroom break, big match. That kind of you scale downward and then keep going back and up, and it's highs and lows. But it's hard to tell, because if you switch this pay-per-view around and you watch it for the first time, then maybe that would have been a mistake. Maybe it would have been too much of a downer and people would have been exhausted or something. I don't know. But I think the Young Bucks being champions makes sense. I think that their partnership with Jack Perry makes sense. I'm hoping that all parties have learned from their mistakes of this CM Punk situation, and that Punk is not going to cause any problems, that Jack Perry realizes that maybe the glass thing was handled very poorly on his end too, and that we could all just move on, because pro wrestling is one of those weird things where it's things can stick forever, or it can just be all right, that's enough, move on. And I'd rather this be one of the latter situations. Latter, not ladder, with a ladder match. But yeah, two good matches right after each other, and then we had our main event. Get a hiccup there. Samoa Joe against Swerve Strickland for the AEW World Championship. And I can already tell you that on my list of the end of the year awards, I've got that Golden Jaguar thing now for not just Swerve Strickland, but also for WWE with, was it Carmelo Hayes, I think? Or was it Trick? It was one of those guys, I think. It's funny that it's just yeah, you do that. That's a fucking cool outfit. So you do something inspired by that. It's also going to look cool. So one of the best ring gear things, I'm sure, by the end of the year. And Swerve and Joe have a rock solid enough match that's not going on my match of the year by any means, but I think that they did a good enough job just having a match. No Hangman Adam Page, which is totally fine. And especially after Jack Perry just showed up in the previous segment. So it's kind of you don't want to do that twice. And Swerve wins. Just as straightforward, outright as that. Swerve is now the first ever AEW Black World Champion ever. So history already in the books right there. And I had put this on the EWN thing. It's not only big for, or maybe put it on Smark at moment. I forget. One of those two. I write too many things at the same time. It's not only big for Swerve to win the world title, just period. it's not only big for Joe to have dropped the title, just period. And it's also not only big for Swerve to win the championship from Joe and to be the first ever black world champion in AEW, but there are still so few black superstars who have been world champions when you come to AEW, WWE, WCW. There's really, like 8, I think? And that counts like 3 different world championships in WWE. I guess 4, technically, if you count the 2 different world heavyweight championships are separate, but that's still just stupid to me. Because you got like Booker T, Mark Henry, Big E, Kofi Kingston, Bobby Lashley. You know, you got Ron Simmons in WCW, Swerve Strickland now. Like, there's not many. So it's still huge beyond just the first milestone in AEW. It's huge just as, yeah, this very, very rarely ever happens. It's crazy after all these years. So props to AEW for making that decision. Props to Swerve and Joe for putting on a good match. And for Swerve to be in that kind of a position to begin with, because let's face it, he was not working his way up to being that in WWE. He had a solid North American Championship situation going on in NXT, but then when he went to the main roster, it's just not working out. So he is one of those talents that definitely benefited from going over to AEW. Certain people I still think should be popping over to WWE. Like, I think that's going to be better for Jade in the long run. Still think that would be better for MJF, but remains to be seen. But Swerve is one of those guys that's going to swing the pendulum a little bit more back to AEW. It's not going to make, okay, now everybody wants to go to AEW just because of this reason. And it's not going to halt the momentum of WWE either. Not that it should necessarily, one screw over the other company just by succeeding, but, swinging pendulum, that's what happens. Something like WrestleMania happens, WWE becomes a real hot ticket item. People will start ragging on AEW a little bit more. AEW does something good, there's more of a chance that people will be a little bit more accepting of that, and hopefully not just ragging on WWE, because it's like you shouldn't just do the tribalism thing. We've talked about that before. But I think that, this is a good thing for Swerve, for the locker room, for AEW. It's a good feel-good story for a lot of people that are going to be very, very invested in Swerve as champion just because of, him being the first black world champion in AEW. So I'm curious who he fights next, because I would assume it would be Hangman coming back and then just kind of telling that story. But then again, I don't know where a lot of these belts are going to go. And this is like one of the first times that if you go to the page on smarkmmo.com where I have the current and future champions predictions, I like almost everyone on AEW I have listed down there. I have no idea, because I really can't picture like who's going to beat Roderick Strong, or who would be the person to beat Kazuchika Okada, or who is going to win the tag titles next. There's nobody that stands out to me for most of these belts. Willow, yeah, she's going to drop to Mercedes. Toni Storm, I would assume probably Jamie Hayter. Maybe that's their whole game plan, is to do that in Wembley. A lot of other people, I don't know, man. And that's pretty fun, I'd rather that be the case than to know everything that's going to happen going forward. So we're just going to have to see how that all plays out. I am no more or less invested in AEW after this pay-per-view. I don't know if you would constitute that a win, or if you'd constitute that a loss, or if it's technically so much of a wash that, just by very nature of me saying I haven't gone up or down, that means that it's neither negative nor positive. But I know the game plan of a company like AEW would be wanting somebody like me to go, okay, we're all back on track, and now I'm like super gung-ho AEW. And then the haters that just have it out for AEW for some reason would end up looking at that and thinking, well, how are you not more negative about it or whatever? And to me, I just go, well, if you look at what I said here, some of the stuff didn't work for me. Some of the stuff I thought was really good. 50-50, So not going to be on my list of best pay-per-views of the year. Not going to be on my list of worst pay-per-views of the year. It's just a show. And I do wish that it was shorter. I think I would have enjoyed it more if a few matches weren't on the card and this was just a 3-hour long, maybe you got the Joe and Swerve match, you've got the tag title match, you got Danielson, Ospreay, Toni Storm and Thunder Rosa, Hook and Jericho could be in there. And then maybe you just pick one of the other matches, maybe Strong and O'Reilly, I guess. And then if that would have been the whole card, I think I would have liked it a lot better. Now, I did just pick basically the matches that I liked the best, so I'm not just, it's pretty obvious at that point. But I think that, the length of these pay-per-views is always going to be a thing for me. WrestleMania is not the average WWE pay-per-view, so take with that what you will. I don't know if that really would change anybody's opinion about anything or change anybody's opinion about the way that I am approaching AEW and WWE stuff, but let me know what you think in the comment section below. And we will, of course, continue to talk about the fallout of this in all sorts of different ways. I don't know how I'm going to tie that into the Monday morning Q&A article, but I'm going to write that up in a little bit too. We'll probably talk about some of the fallout through the hot tags. Obviously, we're not going to be talking about AEW when it comes to the WWE draft talk that's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or so. But, maybe it might come into the discussion somewhere. So if you want us to do anything in particular, go back and check this out in some fashion, do some kind of a thing special for Rob and Callum to give their opinions or whatever. Definitely let us know. Directly sponsor something through the Patreon or the YouTube channel membership on the Pick Your Poison tier. That's the best way to just make sure that we definitely do something. Wow, my lighting is so much better when I don't have my white screen of notes in front of me and I just have a black screen. I got to keep that in mind in the future, that this looks a lot more natural. I don't know how I'm going to do that if I need to read my notes going forward. Something for me to think about. I don't know. But so that would basically conclude AEW Dynasty, and any other lingering opinions that I'm not thinking of now that I want to talk about, you'll hear it on a Darkcast. You'll hear it on a future episode of Hot Tags or something like that. I don't know. So drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'll keep the discussion going there. Make sure you are following Facebook and Twitter at SmarkOutMoment. Maybe you should be checking out all the other stuff too. If you're interested, of course, in Fanboys Anonymous related stuff and not just pro wrestling, then check out the Fanboys Anonymous content over on fanboysanonymous.com. Check out the Fantasy League stuff coming up soon when we're going to do our draft of our rosters. Check out the Linktree, of course, amangotree.com and anthonymango.com. Both lead you to a series of a bunch of different accounts. I'm always adding just very quick movie ratings over to Letterboxd, I should say. And, most recently I watched the 3 Blade movies, and I watched Steel last night. Steel is awful. I watched it specifically for that reason. I was like, I've been watching a lot of bad movies on purpose. But I don't really do movie reviews for them, like typing out full reviews, but you get to see like where I rank them and stuff. And, if you're interested in that side of things and all, but just follow all over those things, Facebook, Twitter, and all. Follow me at Toni Mango, and stay tuned for everything else that's happening on this podcast and on this channel and on this website. Like I said, mock draft stuff coming up for the Fantasy League, also Hot Tags edition, and a main event of talking about where the WWE should move people around in the trades for Raw, SmackDown, and NXT for the WWE draft. Still not sure exactly how we're going to do that. I am leaning towards most likely I will just set aside time for myself to actually do a full roster switch up. And I might actually just do that live or something. I don't know. You interested? If you are, then let me know. Then I'll do it live. If not, then I will just pre-record this, I should say. I'm just botching all over the place. Am I very tired? Then I'll just pre-record it, maybe like after NXT or something, and just, give Rob and Callum a break. And anyway, if you're going back to an old episode, you're checking out a future episode. Can't wait to see you next time, everybody. That's going to do me in for this edition. Thank you for listening. Adios for now. This has been another Smark Out moment, and I'm being counted out.